Dragon Age Veilguard reviews have gone up. We're going to talk about them. Elephant in the room, I did not get a review code. I'm not particularly perturbed because it just means that I have more time to play the Monster Hunter Wilds demo that goes live tonight. So I'm perfectly content. Okay, I'm perfectly content. But I have not played the game beyond the preview event I went to, where I got to play about 7 hours of it. That was split up around the game. At the time, I said I thought the game had a ton of potential, and if they could maintain that same level of what we got during the previews, I thought this could be a really, really big success for BioWare. The danger, of course, being that at preview events, you play vertical slices. You play the portions of the game they thought were the absolute best they had to offer, which is why it's at a preview event. And so typically, if your experience at a preview event was 10 out of 10, the final product is going to be a little bit worse than that, or a lot worse than that if it was really drastic between the two. But I was like, okay, if my preview event experience was a 9 out of 10, that would land like the expected Metacritic at maybe 8 out of 10 or 80 out of 100. And that seems to be where most of these reviews have landed. But the elephant in the room is that they were very selective with review codes, who got access to them, and what their standard were or was, and why and how they were selective remains up in the air. I've been talking to people over the last few days, over the weekend, other YouTubers and streamers and stuff, some of whom were shocked they didn't get codes, others that weren't that surprised. And I've been trying to figure out what the standard was, because the standard was not those who glazed BioWare previously. The standard was not those who had covered BioWare a ton in the past, though that certainly seemed to have helped your chances. I have a theory as to what their standard was, because it basically looks like they got a list of, say, 500 creators, and, press and like the big websites, they all got codes. But with the content creator side of things, it looks like they had the list, and then they filtered out people based on a couple of criteria, and then the remainders got access to the game. I have a theory as to what that filter was. I'm not 1,000% sure of it, but I'll just so I don't want to say it if it ends up not being accurate. But I'll just say, I think what primarily determined your access to this game was whether or not you covered a couple of other releases in a lot of detail. I think if you covered those releases in a lot of detail, that precluded your access to this game. I cannot confirm that, but that's my working theory right now, because all the people that got access to the game seemingly did not do a lot of coverage on a couple of notable releases in recent memory. But having said that, setting that aside for now, I want to say at the outset, before we look at each of these individual reviews, I'm not going to tolerate people suggesting that because somebody liked Veilguard, they were bought off. I'm not going to tolerate people saying that, somebody was reviewing the game in bad faith or anything. A lot of these guys that we're going to mention, I've met, I've done collabs with, I've talked to, they're good guys. They're just reviewing the game honestly. Like, if they didn't like Veilguard, it's not because they didn't get a big enough check. It's not because there's some conspiracy. They probably just didn't like the game. And on the flip side, if one of these YouTubers or streamers or whoever we're going to talk about really liked Veilguard, that doesn't mean that they were bought off. Maybe they just liked it, okay? So I want to be clear at the outset that we're not going to put up with allegations calling into question people's, integrity. These guys we're going to talk about are all, as far as I'm aware, really good guys and are doing their absolute best to review these games honestly, okay? And I'm sure we can all be real with that. We can look at the game analytically and critically without getting into all that nasty stuff. Okay, so at the outset, where does the game sit right now on Metacritic? Well, we are sitting at an 84 out of 100 on PS5, 80 on PC, and 93 on Xbox. Though, to be fair, Xbox only has 5 critic reviews. It seems like the majority of people were reviewing on PlayStation 5. If we look at, let's say, just PS5, because it has the most reviews so far, there's some of these that I just don't recognize. Honestly, it seems like if you were part of a media website, whatever, gaming website, you got access to the game. But even then, it seems like codes were extremely limited. I spoke to somebody who works out of Europe, and they said for their entire country, there were 3 to 4 codes that went out. So for everybody that spoke that language, there were only 4 codes that went out across websites, content creators, whatever. If you were in that country, there were only that many to mess with. So, or to distribute. But we can see that Eurogamer has given it a perfect score. Perfect score. Game Rant gave it a perfect score. Wow's Canauza. A lot of these I don't recognize. It also, is it just me? Does it not seem like a little weird to have like Eurogamer and then Eurogamer Germany, or IGN and then IGN Germany? You know, does it not seem weird to have those both included? It seems like only one of those should be included, but whatever. PC Games, 9 out of 10. Games Radar gave it a 9 out of 10. Screen Rant gave it a 9 out of 10. I don't recognize a lot of these. Forbes, Paul Tassi, get ready for people to be upset. I don't know why people hate Paul Tassi, but ooh, the forehead. 7 head more like. But he's got his review up at 85. The Gamer, Dexerto. Don't they just do Twitter drama? Why are they reviewing video games? I don't know what's going on anymore, man. And then we get more into like the average kind of meh review scores. They say it's not the sequel I dreamed of 10 years ago when Inquisition's credits rolled on my screen. Nonetheless, the game reassured me that there are still people at BioWare who sincerely respect and love the Dragon Age world. That's good. VGC, they typically do like pretty decent, but you see what I mean? Like it converts the 3 out of 5 stars down to 6 out of 10. Dragon Age, Veilguard has strong characters, but gameplay stuck in the past. So there's a lot of these reviews, but what's interesting is the split. What's interesting is the split and the divide. So Synth Potato, he tweeted this out, calling to attention the disparity between what a lot of like big name YouTubers have said about the game and what, you know, the few that got access to the game, and what a lot of games, media, and press have been saying. So a lot of, you know, big press sites have been pretty glowing about it. But then YouTubers, on the YouTube side of things, people found it. Not everybody. I think Mortismal said he really liked it. But some big name YouTube reviewers did not find it particularly compelling at all. Now, I'll look at like maybe the first few sentences of a couple of these. I don't want to just like watch the entire review because I don't want to affect either of their videos' performance. You know, I don't want people to be like, oh, I don't need to watch Maddie's review because I saw Luke react to it. So we're not going to like watch Maddie's review or watch Skillup's review in that way because I don't want to step on their toes or anything. But the sentiment is clear. Maddie, as a longtime fan of BioWare games, you know, really likes Mass Effect, for example, found it lacking. And I don't know Skillup's history with BioWare, but also didn't love it. I was hoping maybe it would be described in his description like Maddie's, but he has a sponsorship for the review. Don't tell ACG. But anyway, so when we look at all of this, it seems like from my initial perusal, it seems like there's a distinction between those who were hoping for like the totally open-ended, really intense role play of Dragon Age games of the past. Those people found the game much more lacking. But those who like more modern, action-oriented RPGs found the game much more interesting and much more compelling. And this is, again, where I don't think it's as clear as like one of these people is right, one of them is wrong. If you really like big set pieces, if you really like high production value, if you like crazy action, all of that stuff, you're probably going to like Veilguard, is what it seems like. If you liked God of War, for example, God of War Ragnarok and the crazy set pieces and scale of what they did there, you're probably going to like this. But if you wanted something more akin to like Dragon Age Inquisition or Dragon Age Origins, this probably is not going to do it. Okay. So that's where I think the distinction is coming from. Because a lot of these little tidbits we're going to see mention the scope and scale. They'll mention the linearity. They'll mention, you know, these different factors. But it does seem like one of the determining factors is whether or not somebody was hoping for that totally open, endless freedom, right? Let's see what IGN said, because who cares about affecting IGN? Okay. And then we'll look at the first few sentences of Maddie's video, see what he thought about it. Okay, but again, we won't watch the whole thing. Let's see what they said.
As I excitedly slashed, blasted, wooed, looted, and delved my...
Hold on, real quick, little bit of research. Do they have the full... No, they don't have the article linked. Because usually you can tell a lot about how somebody's going to review a game based on their previous review history, reviews. So Aura, World of Warcraft, The War Within, Stormgate, The Still Wakes the Deep game, V Rising, Manor Lords, Sons of the Forest, Deep Rock Galactic, Stargate, Rogue Trader. Okay, so that's at least an RPG. Persona 5 Tactica, sort of. City 2 Skylines, Dune, Baldur's Gate 3. Okay. So Pentiment. Okay. So there are some bigger name like RPGs and stuff on here that I'm seeing. So it's not like they assigned it to somebody just totally out of the blue, which is reviewing Factorio. Yes, please. Give me another excuse to to play that. So okay, it does seem like this reviewer has a history within RPGs. Okay, we've established that. Let us continue.
My way through the stunning and enthralling world of Dragon Age: The Veilguard, I kept having one thought. Wait, BioWare made this? 2024 BioWare?
You're really selling it.
With this game coming in the wake of the debacle that was Anthem, itself preceded by Dragon Age Inquisition and Mass Effect Andromeda, which were both merely alright in hindsight, I wasn't sure these former masters of the role-playing game craft could make a game like this anymore.
Especially when you factor in that a lot of those old guard of BioWare have seemingly left. Some of the people that I spoke to at the preview event who were pretty high up in the chain of command for this game, they have been there for a very long time. So it's not like everybody's gone. You know, with Rocksteady, it seems like everybody is gone. It seems like the team that made Arkham Asylum, City, and Night, seems like pretty much all of those people were kind of headhunted from Jamie Walker and Sefton Hill when they left to make their new studio, and everybody left behind there is a lot of like newbies. But in this case, it does seem like there's a few people, but the studio is nowhere near the same as it was back in like 2010. You know, it's very, very different.
But putting together my team of interesting and endearing companions to save the world felt like getting the old band back together, in more ways than one.
Archdemons attacking the north wall!
Try the horns.
The Archdemon's too loud!
No one's retreating.
There's no choice, sir. We're under siege. We have to fall back to the dragon trap.
Forget the trap. Send word to Commander Janos. Rally outside the wall.
The scope of this adventure is the whole north of Thedas, sending you from the coasts of Ravane to the blighted wilds of the Anderfels, as you attempt to prevent the rise of an ancient and menacing evil. It was thrilling, as a longtime fan of the series, to finally see so many of the places I'd only read about in a journal entry way back in 2009. And the way BioWare has us go about that exploration is very focused and deliberate. Veilguard's level design was one of the first things that jumped out at me, reminding me of the original Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic almost more than anything. The slick, looping corridors with just enough little nooks to discover are cleverly interconnected in a way that proves how a BioWare-style RPG gains a lot and loses almost nothing by ditching the idea of a fully open world.
This is one of the most like scandalous things about Veilguard that at least I saw in the comment section, was people could not wrap their heads around what they were trying to do here. And to be fair, it was really hard to communicate. The level layouts are not like, it's not an open world RPG. It's not one of those where it's like totally open-ended. We can just go anywhere in any order, do whatever. It works much closer to like, I bring up the example again, but God of War. And I think it's because God of War came out right as they were starting to do pre-production on this, and so I think that informed a lot of it. But it's pretty much linear, and then you can go backtrack. There's nooks and crannies, little secrets to be found. There's stuff like that. But for the most part, the way you go through the game is in a linear fashion. And it's not like, that's not the worst thing ever for an RPG. If anything, like I've been really burnt out with every game trying to be an open world RPG game, and it just loses all meaning, especially when the open worlds are boring and just empty. And I went back and I tried to play some Inquisition in preparation for this. I'm just going to be real. I'm kind of glad that they didn't try to do the open world thing. Open worlds are not as easy as just make a big map and then sprinkle crap everywhere. It's not that simple. It's quite complicated, and there is a real art form to it. I mean, look at Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, if you just look at that on paper and you're like, yeah, it's a big map where you can ride your horse through open fields of grass for a minute, 2 minutes at a time, and nothing will happen other than the roar of thunder in the distance. But players will still find it captivating and will still be enthralled. Not everybody, but most players. It takes a lot of skill to nail that. It takes a lot of talent to really nail that and make that work. It's you know, it's that confidence to not sprinkle in a ton of crap. You know, that's I think why that game excels. But hearing that they ditched the open world approach that they took in Inquisition, to me was actually a positive. I know some people were kind of bummed by that, but for me, I was like, okay, good. Because Inquisition's open world was like the definition of quantity over quality. Thank you everybody for the super chats and stuff. Beard Machine also on Twitch for the Prime sub. We'll get to all that. We'll catch up on all that once we hit like a more natural break.
The exceptions to that are a couple of the more vertical sections of the city of Minrathous, which can be a little bit of a pain in the ass to navigate sometimes. Across the board, though, the environment art is really jaw-dropping. From the desolate peaks of Kal Shirak to the surreal floating elven ruins in Arlathan Forest. I was very pleased with the character designs, too. The armor and outfits are fabulous. I spent more than an hour in the character creator, like I usually do, and came out with a version of our protagonist, Rook, who delighted me every time she was in frame.
It is a really good character creator. It was funny when we went to the preview event, they told everybody, spend about 30 minutes on it and then get going. Cause like you have a lot of game to get through. And if you don't kind of get going, you're going to run out of time and you won't be able to complete all the quests. So I made like the basic ass generic white male number 4, which to be fair is basically just me with longer hair. And I got playing, but there was, I won't call them out because I'm not sure if they'd be like proud of this. Maybe they've been open about it. I don't know. But there was a person next to me or near me who spent like an hour and 20 minutes in the character creator. And they had like 3 or 4 people come up and be like, you really should start playing. Like you're really running out of time. Like we got to get going. Like, yeah, I'm almost done. And it was like, you could see the BioWare people walking behind. They're like, they still haven't started. Like we're enjoying that they took their time, but like, we got to get going. It was pretty funny.
This might be some of the best looking hair I've ever seen in a video game.
I'll bet.
Even with all of that visual splendor, I was able to get a stable 60 FPS at 4K on my RTX 4070 Super with DLSS set to maximum performance, which usually didn't affect the visual quality in very noticeable ways.
They recorded this review footage at 1080p, otherwise I would zoom in and enhance, but I can't. IGN, I'm just saying, guys, your company is worth however many millions of dollars, okay? If me, some dumbass with a Lego and candle addiction, if I can manage to film footage in 4K 60, you should be able to as well. I don't think that's even that controversial of a thing to say, okay? I really don't. You see that crap back there? That's a bunch of crap I just bought to rebuild my gaming PC because I wasn't happy with the performance I was getting with the setup I have. So like I'm a bit of a perfectionist, to be fair, but I feel like 4K 60 in 2024 should be the standard expectation. And to have like one of the biggest reviews of the year in terms of like anticipation and importance, because I think a lot of people are on the edge about this game, and to only manage 1080p, like, hello, is it 2011 anymore? What are we doing?
The one exception to this was in the late game when there could be so many spell effects going off at once that I not only lose frames, it's also just difficult to even see what's actually going on. Through the crackle and sparks, though, Veilguard's combat is definitely a refinement of what we saw in Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition. I've always preferred the more tactical style of Dragon Age Origins or Baldur's Gate 3, but that ship sailed so long ago for this studio, not even the Evanurus remember what it looked like. And so, judging this very action-focused combat system for what it is, it's pretty good.
I also liked it when I played it, but to be fair, we didn't play with like a high level character. We played with the highest level we played was probably like 20 hours into the game. It was the end of Act 1, so a third of the way through the character progression. So we didn't see any like late game stuff. Having said that, I do think this was actually an accidental correct choice on their part. They didn't know at the time that they had Baldur's Gate 3 coming, in the wings in 2023 to kind of definitively be like the best RPG of the decade. They were like, oh, maybe they're going to do that. But it's everybody prior to the launch of Baldur's Gate 3 thought it would still be really niche, thought it would be just like Divinity. Everybody likes those kinds of games, loves it, but it's not really hitting into the mainstream. Baldur's Gate surprised everybody, including Larian, by blowing up into the mainstream. But the reason why I think that moving to like a real-time, less tactical action style combat system, I think that was a net positive because it really just distinguishes this game from Baldur's Gate 3. Because the more that people compare Veilguard to Baldur's Gate, I think the more disappointed they would be if they expected that level of interactivity and that level of role-playing finesse and stuff. They would be disappointed. But if they can make this feel like a different thing, then this stands a better chance at winning people over.
BioWare has committed fully to the fast-paced style and refined it to a point that I enjoy it quite a bit. And the ability to pause and issue party members' orders, just like in Mass Effect, still gives some opportunity for more tactical players like myself to look around the battlefield and consider our next move.
But to be clear, I saw some people misunderstanding this. That wheel you pull up after the first hour or two of play, you're not going to be using that at all. These can all be activated with like quick casting. So I forget what the buttons were. It was like left trigger, left on D-pad or something like that. So you can quickly activate these without having to pull up the whole wheel and freeze time every single time. I know some people were worried, like, so it's real time and it's high action and intensity, but it's going to be like / pause, select ability, / dodge / pause. It's not like that. It's not like that.
It definitely feels better on a controller than mouse and keyboard, though. I was somewhat
1000%.
disappointed that party members are more like extensions of your own character in combat at this point, rather than their own entities. They don't even have health bars, for instance. They can't be knocked out, whereas you instantly lose an encounter if Rook goes down.
Sucks to suck.
They do have equipment slots and skill trees, though less than what Rook gets. But overall, the amount of customization available for the whole squad through piles and piles of interesting upgradable loot was more than enough to satisfy my RPG appetites, if not fulfill my wildest fantasies of intricate battle management.
Nice shot.
In my 100-hour, near 100%, almost obsessively completionist play.
Scooby Doobert donated
Thank you, Scooby.
$19.99 through Super Chat. I love Star Wars Outlaws. This is one of my most anticipated games of the year. It's mind-blowing the hoops some of y'all will jump through. Conspiracies you make up just to hate the fact that some people...
Oh, cut off because the character limit. That some people enjoy a game. I do think that there is a problem right now in the games industry where people are really afraid of just saying that they like something that isn't universally praised. So I do think that is an issue. Ban Scooby. No, we're not banning Scooby. for liking Star Wars Outlaws. Ban. No. But like there are some games that might land at like 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or 6 out of 10, whatever, and you might still really enjoy them, even though they're not that great. You can still enjoy it and still have a good time. Like I enjoyed my time with Star Wars Outlaws. Was it like a critically acclaimed? Was it a game that deserves Game of the Year? No, No, not at all. But I was glad I played it. And I had a fun time, even if I was bashing my head against the wall a few times with like the brain dead AI and stuff like that. And what's like another example? Mirage? Yeah, maybe Mirage is a good example. Like Mirage is no masterpiece, but it also wasn't really trying to be. It was trying to be like this game that was just scratching an itch for old school fans of Assassin's Creed that hadn't gotten a more traditional style Assassin's Creed game. And in that pursuit, it was very successful, and I had a really good time as an old school fan of Assassin's Creed. You know, it wasn't winning any awards or anything, but I was glad I played it. I had a good time. Doesn't mean I thought it was great or anything, but I thought it was good. It was what I needed it to be. And I think Star Wars Outlaws could fit into that category for some people. Avatar, for some people, was exactly that. They just really loved exploring Pandora, and even though the game had lots of problems, they still enjoyed it. So I do think it's totally fine if you like games that are not universally acclaimed. And I think we should all acknowledge that it's okay to like kind of games occasionally. Even if like it's not a masterpiece, you can still have fun with it. I mean, look at all the people that are obsessing over like, I was going to say Call of Duty, but honestly, I played Black Ops 6 last night, Zombies, with my brothers. We had a really damn good time, dude. Like, I will say we spent like probably 30-40 minutes just going to the loot crate thing and just trying to get ray guns over and over and over again. Did like 80 pulls before we got it, but still waiting for the objective bad. Like what the standard is for bad. Well, I mean, there are certain things that where you can just be like, the game doesn't function properly. That would make it bad. Where like objectively bad. If it doesn't run, if it doesn't play properly, if the PC port runs at 5 frames a second, like that's bad. But yeah, like Gollum on a technical level is just objectively bad. When it's running well, maybe then you can get into the nuance of subjective likes and dislikes and stuff, and that's fine. But there are some things that are objectively bad. It's like when we talked about Shattered Space. Shattered Space, there's some things that you can subjectively like or dislike, like the writing, for example, or the quest design, where you can like or dislike that. But then there's other things you can objectively look at, like the scale, the play time, the total playable hours, the original weapons, the original enemy types. Like that stuff you can objectively quantify and count, and then compare it to other things at a similar price point, like Phantom Liberty or Far Harbor or Blood and Wine, and other expansions like that from other companies or from BGS themselves. And then you can clearly say, okay, objectively, comparing 1-to-1, this falls short. So there's more nuance involved with it, certainly, but it's not like you can look at a video game and just say that is objectively bad because of the characters and character designs and the gameplay. Like, that's not how that works. What's the deal with Dragon Age, Dylan? Oh, so much. You probably realized in the last 40 minutes as we've been talking about it. Edgar, thank you for the 10. Have you seen all the objective reviews are glazing Veilguard? It's another Starfield situation in the making. Thank God for skill up. I mean, we'll continue to look at it. It really just seems like if you were hoping for more of an action-packed linear thing, you're going to really like this. If you're hoping for something like Dragon Age Origins or Baldur's Gate, you're going to be disappointed. It really just seems like it's based on what you were looking for, but we'll look at some more as we go through this. Norris Peak, thank you for the 5. Have you heard about BioWare whining and dining people for the Dragon Age game, either for good reviews or keys? Have I heard about that happening? No, because that didn't happen. If it did, that would be fascinating and probably illegal, but no, I've not heard about anything like that happening. So, no, I'm not familiar. What it seems, like I said at the top, I think there was a standard that they evaluated people against to determine whether they got the codes or not. I don't think it was based on positive coverage or this or that. It seems to me like they specifically filtered out people
Hey, Luke.
for other reasons.
Doing well.
Again, I don't want to say clearly what it is because I don't know if it is in fact the case. I haven't played the game. I'm waiting for a couple of other people who have played the game to get back to me as to kind of what they've heard. Because one person I spoke to was actually able to talk to their EA rep and have a conversation about why they didn't get like a code. And what that EA rep allegedly told them was very, very interesting. And I don't think they were supposed to say what they said, but I'm waiting to hear that from one more person before I like talk about it openly, because it could just be one person maybe misunderstanding the conversation they had. But yeah, it's a whole thing. Anyway. So is EA not BioWare? Yes, to be very clear, all of this stuff with the review codes and everything, it was an EA thing. It does not seem like this was BioWare specifically saying, give it to this person, don't give it to that person. If I get the DM during stream confirming it, I will talk to you guys about it. I'll mention it. I don't want to be one of these guys that's like, I heard something sort of from sort of one person, send it out. Like, I don't want to be that guy. I want to wait till I actually have at least two sources to back it up. Rango, thank you for the 2. Maddie hates Veilguard means the game is good. Oh, Rango, you saucy boy. Spencer, thank you for the 2. Did you see Wolfheart's Dragon Age Twitter drama? Brutal. No, I mean, I saw mentions of his tweet and we talked about his tweet. I don't know if there's drama involved with it. I don't like look at X Twitter drama if I can help it. So if I see a conversation's going and it seems heightened emotionally, or if it seems like it's drama based, I just mute the conversation and move on. Elijah, thank you for the 2. So Krabby Cat didn't get a review code. Dude, that's what we need. Right when we need him most. That's what we need. It's a Krabby Cat video. Metaphysical Mike, thank you for the $5.55. Thank you for that. Jack, thank you for the 5. Have you seen how their heads are too big? If they shrink them by 25%, they look normal. Come on now. 25%. Do you have any idea how much 25% smaller would be on this body? That's insane. That's crazy. This isn't Beetlejuice. Like, come on. Caleb, thank you for the 5. Thought you should know, according to Maddie, that, quote, a third of the way through the game, end quote, is more like 3/4 of the way. Okay, so you mean that Maddie said that, like, Act 1 is, like, say 20 hours long, but then he's saying the other acts are way shorter? Is that what you mean? Act 1 is 70% of the game, about 35 hours. Okay, the person at BioWare that I spoke to, he was saying that it was like 20 hours through. But to be fair, he was like one of the tech guys, one of like the engineers that was helping run the event as well. So he probably wouldn't know exactly how long the acts were. But that's interesting. If Act 1 is like, it's part 9 out of 14 or something. It's about 70% of the game. Interesting. Okay, so in that case, we probably played with a character that was much farther or much higher leveled than I thought. How long did he say the game was? It's not necessarily bad. I mean, it's interesting that we were made to believe at the preview event that was like, you're a third of the way through the game at the end of Act 1. But if you're actually over 2/3 the way through, like, that's different. Game is about 60 hours, around 50 hours. Okay. Like, that's not bad for me. That's a good playtime. Anyway, sorry. Speaking of Jacob, sorry for having to edit around all of this. Let's see what they say. Let's continue. Well, first, Dylan, thank you for the 10. I haven't really seen a lot of people make this connection, but to me, the combat and the aesthetic of the game seems pretty similar to like Hogwarts Legacy, especially the dragons themselves. Yeah, and how the spells work is also similar with the quick casting and stuff. So I do think that's part of it, but to be fair, the combat system in this game was designed well before Hogwarts Legacy came out. So it's probably a happy little accident, but they do kind of feel similar.
Through, I styled Rook as a Spellblade, a mid-ranged melee hybrid mage, and really enjoyed the playstyle once I'd unlocked all of my core tools. Dancing with a dagger through a lightning storm I summoned, darting out of danger and then back in for a lethal blow, is just a really good time that rewards precise timing and wise target prioritization. This isn't the tactical Dragon Age of my youth, but it is a Dragon Age I can vibe with. And the highlights of combat are definitely the boss fights, which offer a really satisfying challenge even on the default difficulty. While standard mob fights with Darkspawn or Venatori cultists eventually got a little repetitive after 90 plus hours, going up against a high dragon never failed to get my blood pumping, as I had to carefully study attack patterns and think on my feet. In the sense that a BioWare RPG is really about your companions, Also known as the friends we made along the way, this might be the most BioWare game of all time. Not only is the whole squad made up of complex, memorable, likable,
I will also say Balara in my preview.
not only is
She is probably one of the most annoying companions I've seen in a game in recent memory. Like that kind of toxic, positive friend, quote unquote, that some games or movies have. It's like, oh, well, we can do it. Let's go. You know, come on, let's work together. Like that kind of thing drives me crazy. Like, shut up, please. Stop. The second I got the ability to take her off my squad or my team, I did. It was like, come on.
Is the whole squad made up of complex, memorable, likable, distinct personalities from across Thetis, but they're all treated as the stars of their own story. Veilguard is light on that classic kind of side quest that's like, help Bingo Bongo find some nug grease. And I don't miss those much, because they've been replaced by full-length heroic arcs for each companion, with twists, turns, a personal nemesis, major character developments, and a moment of triumph fit for a protagonist rather than a sidekick.
Our rogue necromancer has hidden something terrible behind this door.
It's like the writers took the loyalty missions from Mass Effect 2 and blew them up into 7 miniature games of their own. Almost every side mission ties into one of these, which obliterates the sense that you're just doing busy work.
Nothing I'm seeing makes me want to look away.
Picking a favorite of the 7
Giggity.
Veilguard members to talk about genuinely feels like an impossible task. I really want to just say all of them are my favorite, but I had a rewarding romance with the stoic Grey Warden Davrin and became mother to his fledgling Griffin pal Asan.
Okay, for a second I thought I heard mother. I was like, no way, there's like babies in this game? Oh God. But okay, no, it's just the Griffin. It's symbolic motherhood, okay? We're not getting all crazy.
So he's got to be my pick for this playthrough. Asan, that is. Seriously, if anything ever happens to this little guy, I will wash Thetis away in a tide of fire. The Vincent Price-inspired gentleman necromancer Emmerich is also a delightful twist on the usual edgy goth death mage tropes.
We'll be fighting weirder stuff than necromancy.
And while we've been asked by the devs not to spoil specifically who I'm talking about here, as a non-binary person myself, Veilguard includes some of the most authentic representation of coming to terms with general gender stuff and having to navigate your family's reaction to it I've yet to see in a game. It doesn't feel like an after-school special or like I'm being pandered to. It's quite well handled, and finding out that the writer for this character is non-binary themselves did not surprise me at all.
A damn good-looking hero, if I do say so.
Remember I said I thought that perhaps there was a standard where if you covered certain games negatively, maybe you didn't get reached out to for this? Hearing this makes me believe more that perhaps my suspicion is correct. The pattern I've recognized, okay, and I oh, it's like it's meant to be. Okay, yeah. That could not have come in at a perfect, more perfect time. That's the other person I've been talking to, asking to verify this. It seems to me like if you covered specifically games like Concord, or if you talked about games like Dustborn or Suicide Squad, negative and certainly aggressively negative ways, for whatever reason, you did not get access to this. I'm not sure why they would be scared. Because it seems like everybody hated those games. But I've noticed that the people who did get through whatever ways, most, not all, but most of them did not do extensive coverage of those games, which is interesting. I just find it, the whole thing is very interesting. This whole thing, it's going to be so telling when we get our hands on the game. It's going to be so interesting.
The larger plot that's threatening the world in the background as we're doing all these more personal quests is nothing particularly outstanding in its overall structure. We need to unite some factions to fight some evil gods who are trying to do bad things with tentacles. The major wrinkle that makes that interesting, however,
I wanted to see if this type of behavior has made you more skeptical of the AAA industry at large.
If this type of behavior has made you more skeptical of the AAA, I mean, I think all you can do is you can only work with the information that you have at the time, right? So we don't want to be cynical where we are reading into stuff that isn't there yet, at least, right? So like at the preview event, based on what we saw there, the game, tons of potential, looked really good, really solid. None of us thought that they were going to get really cagey with review codes. None of us thought that they were going to be like trying to hide away parts of the game until reviews drop. Like same thing with like, I used to be much more hardcore on this, but I've loosened up the more I've thought about it. I don't think it was necessarily fair to be so aggressive against YouTubers or streamers that were really positive towards Cyberpunk 2077 before it came out, and then it comes out and it's totally broken and a disaster, because they were working with the information they had at the time, which was CDPR. The guys behind The Witcher 3 were saying, we're going to fix this. It's going to be great by the time it comes out. Yes, right now, this preview you're seeing is a little rough, but it's going to get there, you know. They were working with the information that they had, and they it wouldn't, of course, be fair to be like, yeah, what we saw was pretty good, but I think it's actually going to suck at launch. Like, that's not fair either. So all you can do is really work with the information you're given and that you have at the time. And with these games, a lot of the time, sunlight's the best like disinfectant of concern. If people are worried about your game, be transparent. Get it out there, talk about it, show it, let it stand on its own 2 feet. If it is that good, it'll be fine. It'll stand up to scrutiny. But unfortunately, I think there's a tendency with a lot of these publishers where they know that maybe some of this might not be received super great, or they know that maybe players won't like that Act 1 is 70% of the game and it's actually, you know, kind of rushed towards the end, or this or that. Like, it's more linear. They thought it'd be open. And so they kind of keep that stuff a little bit more vague until later. And I mean, it's like I said back last week when I talked about not having a review code for it. I was like, the unfortunate thing is, even if the game is really good and gets like 10 out of 10 scores, all anybody's going to talk about is how they were selective with review codes and how it's a fake number. That's basically all anybody's going to be talking about, because that's the impression that you've led them to have. I mean, 84 is not a bad score, but I think we all know that as more people review it, this probably dips into the low 80s, down into maybe the 70s. On PC, it's at 80. It might drop below that as time goes by, but it's just going to be VG247, full of heart is always great ideas. Conversely, many of the ideas feel like they struggled to get out of first gear. Yeah, it's just, whether it makes me skeptical of AAA gaming in general, I think everybody should be to begin with. But it's when I feel like people have been led astray or lied to intentionally that I have a problem, and that I lose sympathy. And do I think they lied to us here? I haven't seen anything that seems like the stuff I've talked about so far, with like the one guy telling me that Act 1 was maybe 20 hours long and leading into later acts would triple that for the total runtime or quadruple it. That probably was just an honest mistake on his part, because he wasn't like in the room when they were deciding how long acts would be. Like, he wouldn't really know based on his position. So I want to be charitable there, but I think with this, again, tucking the game away, it feels bad. It feels kind of slimy, like they had something they didn't want to share with people, or didn't want people to see. And again, to me, it seems like there's a consensus that content creators who have talked about things like AC Shadows a lot, or certainly End Concord, Dustborn, those types of games, some of them still got review codes, to be clear. So maybe that's not the standard, but it seems like the people that talked about that stuff a lot were kind of passed over for this, which is interesting. And then other people, I think probably what happened is that codes were very limited, and then also there were these other things that could be disqualifying, which is how they kind of decided from there where to go. It's very interesting.
Is Solus, also known as the Dreadwolf, Fen'Harel, the elven god of lies and rebellion, waiting in the wings, keeping me guessing about whether he was a friend or foe.
I need to know what the gods are planning.
You are asking for knowledge no mortal in this world is privy to.
As a continuation of the Dragon Age series, Veilguard does feel a little disconnected from where we left off a decade ago. If you were expecting decisions from previous games in the series to carry over...
Oh, Inquisition hair, look at that. Oh man.
I'm sorry to say they've never mattered less. You only get to import 3 choices, one of which only comes up in the context of a single letter you may or may not find and read. You do get to recreate your Inquisitor from Dragon Age Inquisition, the same way Inquisition let you recreate your Hawk if you played Dragon Age 2, and the Inquisitor ends up being a fairly important character, which was cool.
It isn't just Inquisitor, is it? You were someone before that.
But things like who you chose to make the head of the Chantry at the end of Inquisition never come up. There's no sign of the Warden from Origins, even though you visit the stronghold of their order. Hawk gets only a passing mention. There are some other cameos from both Origins and Dragon Age 2, but those characters conspicuously don't reference any important choices you may have made in their presence. This story feels like both a send-off and a soft reboot in a way, which was a bit paradoxically refreshing and disappointing at the same time.
I know some people got really upset about this. I personally don't really care. It seems pretty clear to me that this was supposed to be a reboot and that that's been their intention for a little while. So I know that some people were really bummed that there wouldn't be more mention of like the consequences of these choices and stuff, but I'm not particularly surprised.
Agreed.
The pacing early on is kind of weird too, and I felt like I could practically smell the rewrites. For example, it's hilarious that no one ever says the word Veilguard out loud across the 100 hours I played of this dialogue-packed campaign.
But they say Dreadwolf a lot. Yeah, I still find that so fascinating. What is you guys' theory in chat? What's your theory? I've been trying to figure out why they renamed it from Dreadwolf to the Veilguard. They said it at Summer Game Fest when I went. They said, because they just revealed like the new name, they said they wanted to make the game about the player and the player's party, which was the Veilguard, the Guards of the Veil, and therefore they wanted to rename it to be more indicative of what the game was truly about. But I'm like, the game's also about the Dread. Like, I don't really buy that that was the only reason. I feel like there was something else there, part of their reboot branding. But even then, how does removing Dreadwolf? It's not like they were calling it Dragon Age 5 or something, or Dragon Age whatever, like 4 Veil. I don't know whatever. You get what I mean? You get what I mean? Probably a mandate from marketing to appeal more widely. But again, I don't understand how Veilguard appeals to more people than Dreadwolf. I thought maybe it was because there were all those leaks like 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, which were just really rough, but they were about Dreadwolf and all of that. And so people maybe would have seen that when they Googled the game or something. But I don't know. Wolf is offensive. Well, there are some times where there's issues with naming schemes translating into other languages. Wasn't there something like that with, was it Windows 9? What was it? There was some like famous marketing example of something translating weirdly into other languages so that they couldn't actually do that. So they had to kind of skip it. Dreadwolf gave a lot of context to previous games and they obviously wanted to stay away from those. Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe it just honestly is that they were doing like play tests or something and people were, with it being Dreadwolf, people thought that it was like tied to the previous games more. I don't know. They said they wanted it to focus on the player, not the villain. Yeah, changing the name of a game is not an easy thing or a quick and cheap thing. Like you have to redo all of the marketing and branding and stuff that you did. Like there are probably changes to like the trademarks and there's legal costs involved, not just for one country, but globally, because you're doing all of this. Like there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just like, we wanted to focus on the players more. I just don't buy that excuse, you know? My guess would be the extensive rewriting shifted everything over and maybe no one could get a perspective on what was actually happening in the drafts. Maybe. I don't know. Solus is barely in the game, apparently. Oh, really? Well, maybe that's it. If they were like, he's barely in the game, let's not name the game after him. Maybe that's it.
Exposing a last-minute marketing pivot for what it is.
You're making us sound like Solus. That's uncomfortable.
But it doesn't take too long for things to get on a good track story-wise, and when they do, they stay on it. Aside from...
Oh, Iron Will... Thank you for the 5. The original trailer kind of hinted that the Dreadwolf was an existing thing in the game they needed, and that may have made people believe they had to play the other game. Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, maybe they just thought that they wanted this to stand on its own more, and in their testing, Dreadwolf made people feel like they needed to play Inquisition first or something. I don't know. It's interesting. Either way, I think it's a fascinating choice, because that's like a huge choice. That's like a huge pivot. So it's very interesting. Johnny on Twitch says there were videos of Maddie's Rook floating around online of a conversation with Tash before his review went up. It was confirmed when his review went up because his Rook was very distinct. Oh, really? I know, I'm pretty sure he still uses editors, so that could be an issue. I remember with Starfield, we had such crazy just attention on that we had people trying to like break into my NAS server where I keep all my game recordings. Apparently on stream at some point I had left open the tab for the NAS, because you can like remote access it through your browser, and so they saw whatever information they needed to try and like brute force hack, though it's not really hacking, their way in. And so I got all these emails, like security warnings for the NAS, being like, did you just try to log in? Did you just try to do, and like started freaking out in my inbox. And I was like, are you kidding me? Somebody's trying to get in there, like to get Starfield recorded footage. It was insane. So sometimes that type of thing happens, but also if you have an editor, like if that's true, and I don't know if that's true, I don't think Maddie would ever do anything like leaking his footage for some reason, because I don't know what the benefit would be. But I would call my editors and be like, hey, let's have a talk, because you have my footage. How did this get out there?
One huge choice you'll make early on, the most interesting bits of narrative design don't come up until the very end of Veilguard's story. And again, it's hard to dig into this too much without spoiling something, but the finale is also very much in the spirit of Mass Effect 2, which has an ending that up until now may have been the best series of complex consequential choices ever featured in an RPG. The sacrifices I had to make in the closing hours hurt. The wise decisions I made paid off, and I even got the chance to dramatically flick an ace out of my sleeve at the very last moment, specifically because I took a very thorough and careful approach to everything leading up to that. It really felt like the ultimate reward. Attack! Throughout it all, the cinematic flair is off the charts, proving that BioWare is unmatched in the RPG world in that particular discipline. So much of the best stuff I can't even show you here, but parts of it felt like watching a big budget fantasy movie in the best ways. A triumphant and effective, if not quite iconic, score elevates these moments further. Dragon Age: The Veilguard refreshes and reinvigorates a storied series that stumbled through its middle years, and leaves no doubt in my mind that it deserves its place in the RPG pantheon. The next Mass Effect is going to have a very tough act to follow, which is not something I ever imagined I'd be saying before I got swept away on this adventure.
It's good to have goals in life.
Enjoyable action combat, a fantastic cast of allies with sweeping story arcs all their own, top-notch cinematics, and moving, nuanced character writing are the wings on which this triumphant dragon soars.
It's at the thing!
Pulling out all the stops in a whirlwind tour of Northern Thedas, and capping it with a terrific finale that's built on memorably tough choices and consequences. If we never get another Dragon Age, at least it got to go out on a high note.
Okay. 9 out of 10 from IGN. from somebody who is very familiar with the old school games. Interesting. You guys are also saying that SkillUp had a particularly impassioned review. Like I said at the top, I don't want to just like watch the whole thing because I feel like that kind of diminishes the value of their videos and could potentially affect their performance. So I'm not going to do that, but I am down to watch the first few sentences and stuff and hear what they have to say. Let's see what Maddie brought up in the first few sentences of his review.
There's no easy way to start this review. There are fantasy options aplenty. Metaphor ReFantazio. Elden Ring just got a Shadow of the Erdtree expansion earlier this year. There was also Dragon's Dogma 2. And right now, AAA gaming is going through a massive, massive change where big companies like Bethesda Game Studios, BioWare, Ubisoft really have their back against the wall, and they're not quite the heroes of gaming that they maybe once were. Whereas companies like Larian Studios and CD Projekt Red have solidified themselves as top dogs in the RPG genre, thanks to projects like Baldur's Gate 3, Cyberpunk 2077, The Witcher 3, and so on.
I think it's also important to note that those studios they've taken a very pro-consumer approach as well. With like Larian, no, they're not doing day one DLC. They're not doing big expansions meant to, milk you for all you're worth. Somebody should just clip that and be like, they're not milking you. CDPR certainly had a rough go of it with Cyberpunk, at least to start, but they ended up, in my view, really coming back swinging. And what you recognize from a lot of those examples of studios that have their backs against the wall, they tend to have a much less pro-consumer approach. It seems like in 2024, your customer-facing reputation is more important than ever. Like that really is crucial. Was that the battery? Oh yeah, these headphones are great. You can just hot swap the battery. Not really hot swap, but you can just swap out the battery. It charges in the little dock, so you don't have to like plug your headphones in. It was beeping at me that it was low on battery, so you can just swap the battery out. Now it's back to full charge. Bada bing, bada boom. Isn't that great?
Many great developers rising up in the RPG genre, like Warhorse Studios with Kingdom Come Deliverance. So there's many options beyond the ones that we used to know and love, and BioWare is in a very desperate position. I've covered this game for years, since it was formerly known as Dreadwolf. Before that, it was very much just an idea on paper, and we were talking about it. I was very excited to see what BioWare could bring to the table. But unfortunately, after playing Dragon Age the Veilguard, it is one of the most disappointing games I've played in a while.
More than Hellblade 2. That game for me, remember that? That came out in May. Hellblade 2 came out in May. That was supposed to be like the Xbox, like, W. Like, it was supposed to showcase the power of that technology. Ended up being like, that for me was probably one of the most disappointing games I've ever played. Like, my expectations were very high. It was like, oh my God, that was so bad. I wonder if Maddie would rank that up there too, because it was, whew, that one's rough.
I don't want to say ever, because I don't want to get too much hyperbole in here, but the emotions I experienced throughout this review process was unlike anything I've ever gone through before. It was strange, man. I'm gonna keep it real. Like, it was saddening as the realization set in hour by hour.
This is fascinating because it's so different from the IGN review. It's not like general consensus. These are polar opposites. The other person is saying, oh, it's 9 out of 10. I thought it was amazing. It's going out on a high note. Like, this is great. Maddie's saying he was like going through a crisis of self while playing.
How much this game had let me down. I've had the game for about 2 weeks, put over 50 hours into it, finishing the main story, all of the companion missions, and a bulk of the remaining side content. I'm at 72% of the way to the Platinum Trophy if you need a reference for how much of this game I've cleared off, but I'm not going to bury the lead any further. You're probably as surprised as I am to be hearing me say these things, but no single game has made me go through the string of emotions this one has, because its characters evolve as little as its gameplay. The mistakes made with plot pacing are innumerable. All of the real high-impact choices are baked into the final 2 hours of the game, making them feel really minimal in the scheme of things. Past Dragon Age games matter little here if your 3 available choices in the keep taught you anything before launch, and I'll detail that one later. And last but definitely not least is the line delivery and writing quality are at times embarrassingly low, even for those who have sworn off BioWare for years and are not like me and have continued to play their games and look forward to them. So this is really tough because it does me no pleasure in back-to-back reviews to sit down talking about some of my favorite game developers ever who have made defining video games for me in Bethesda Game Studios and now BioWare, and not just deliver a negative review or a dissatisfied review, but something relatively scathing, especially in BioWare's case when you consider the situation with their studio and how important the success of Dragon Age the Veilguard is to their company's future. Still, all those...
I find this so fascinating. So fascinating. Mortismal says it's great. Eurogamer gave it a perfect score. When you see this much division, this disparity between some reviewers and others, usually it just means the game is going to be highly polarizing. Like, some people are going to love it and other people are going to just really hate it. Another example would be like, I'm trying to think of one that was split more like that. I mean, maybe Dragon's Dogma 2, some people loved that, called that a masterpiece. Other people are like, yeah, no, it's too clunky for me. To an extreme extent, like The Last of Us Part 2, some people love it, think it's an absolute masterpiece. Other people think that it's hot garbage. But like, there's examples of this, and I'm not sure until I get my hands on the game. I'm not sure if any one group is right. The line delivery is for me the particularly concerning bit, because I will say there's been some reviews from big, like IGN gave Dustborn a 7. To give Dustborn a 7, you have to be outside of your mind. Like, I don't know how on earth you could possibly give Dustborn anything above like a 3, okay? Like, the writing was ungodly how bad it was. Like, it would corrupt your soul just by listening to it. So to your IGN and their reviewers not mention problematic writing and bad writing, that to me makes sense. Like, that's not surprising that they didn't bring it up. Does SkillUp mention writing being a problem? Let's see. Again, just looking at the first few minutes.
I want to begin this review the same way I did my Final Fantasy 16 review, which is to say that reviews are opinions. This is my opinion and my opinion only. I expect that there will be a broad range of opinions on Dragon Age the Veilguard, and I encourage you to seek them out. I do not have a monopoly on truth, as I've said many times before.
Yes, you do, SkillUp. Don't undersell yourself like that. You're the king. How dare you call into question yourself, man? Come on. Oh man, this is way more interesting than if people were just like, it's really good. This is way more interesting than if everybody was like, it's really bad. This is fascinating and I love it.
I'm just a nerd with a microphone and a YouTube account. My opinion is no more or less valuable than anybody else's. Okay? All right, so.
Agree to disagree. Your opinion's way more valuable than mine. Just saying. I also appreciate that his rook looks just like him too.
Dragon Age the Veilguard is a colossal disappointment. I really can't put it any other way. I spent 50 hours playing this, and it was time I desperately wished that I could get back. I started having my doubts at around the 10-hour mark. I was thoroughly checked out at the 20-hour mark, and the remaining 30 hours were just excruciatingly painful as I was forced to suffer through the endless morass of banality that is Dragon Age the Veilguard. In many ways, Veilguard is a bigger disappointment than Anthem was. Like, if I was to hand LeBron a tennis racket, I'd expect to see some pretty shitty tennis. BioWare never had any business making a looter shooter, and so when Anthem flopped, its failure was easily explained, easily reconciled.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was expecting Anthem to be particularly good, but I do think a lot of people have been hopeful that this could be good, especially because the previews, again, when we played very specific vertical slices of Veilguard, we thought it was really, really promising and really good. It seems like we might have just been playing very carefully curated segments of the game, and the rest of the game maybe is lacking, but let's see.
If I hand LeBron a basketball, I expect to see some fucking points on the board, and it's impossible to imagine a bigger home court advantage than this for BioWare. The Dragon Age franchise, one of their most beloved and most successful, no pressure from EA to cram in all sorts of live service bullshit like it was meant to have at one point, but they pivoted away.
Yeah, that's one thing to remember, guys, is that Veilguard at one point was like a live service game. I think it was supposed to, somebody in chat, do you guys know? I forget the exact leaks, but I'm not sure if it was just multiplayer or if it was like co-op. I think it was supposed to be like full multiplayer. And then at some point they pivoted off and changed it to this because I think they realized that was just gonna hemorrhage money. But imagine if this can you imagine this game comes out, it's like full on multiplayer? It's fascinating. But maybe that's part of why part of it feels like disjointed, is because half of the game was built on a multiplayer foundation and then was transitioned to this.
Away from that years ago, there's no in-game cash shop here. There was obviously plenty of development time and budget. There was the freedom for BioWare to make a BioWare-ass BioWare game without any compromises and without any excuses. In no way, shape, or form did BioWare meet the moment and capitalize on the opportunity that was handed to them. Dragon Age: The Veilguard apes the most superficial elements of a BioWare game, making no effort to modernize what is a now fairly dated formula, while delivering absolutely none of the writing, characterization, and imagination that made its previous games so great. The writing is frankly terminal. It lacks any nuance or wit or wisdom. It cannot communicate ideas except to say them aloud to the camera. It manufactures petty, unbelievable tension because it doesn't know how to create anything more real, and it's too scared to ever be truly confronting or dark for fear that it might make the audience uncomfortable. Every interaction between the companions feels like HR is in the room, and every
Oh, that's good. I like that. That's a good way of putting it. Every conversation between NPCs feels like HR is in the room. That is indicative of a lot of like modern games, though, isn't it? Where everything is so milquetoast, like they're terrified of saying something like really edgy or wacky. So everybody's walking on HR eggshells. That's funny. Okay.
Interaction led by the main character, Rook, sounds like he's addressing an under-12 soccer team before a semi-final, or teaching toddlers how to properly share toys. The way you build relationships with your companions is so woefully outdated. Drawn-out quest lines completely divorced from the main plot, starring disposable villains and recycling the same settings, enemies, and bosses you find elsewhere. The romance system feels equally antiquated, heavily reliant on the "will bang okay" button, even when it doesn't make sense for that to be an option, with no supporting systems behind it to make your romance decisions feel believable or consequential. The world design is so weird. I have never encountered worlds quite like this. They feel more like Overwatch maps than actual explorable spaces, and they're littered with puzzles so mind-numbingly stupid that I wonder how little BioWare must think of our ability to solve puzzles.
If you remember the multiplayer foundations of this, it's very possible that the shift to linear levels was because, or more linear levels, like linear wide, I think is how they phrased it. It might have been because they were expecting players to go through it in a multiplayer setting, like with friends filling out the rest of your party. So like certain puzzles are only completable with certain characters in your party. So if they have these levels set up this way, then you can only go through them with that layout and with that grouping. Like I really would be fascinated to hear how much of this is the way it is because of those foundations.
And the combat is like, man, shallow is too kind a word. The lack of enemy variety, the sponginess of those enemies, how limited your control over party members is, it all makes combat so utterly mindless and so breathtakingly repetitive. Let me put it this way. I spoke to 2 other reviewers who both ended up lowering the difficulty to the easiest setting, not because it was hard, but because it was just so drawn out and so boring. I've never done that before for any game that I've reviewed, but I did it at the 40-hour mark here, and I swear to God, I wish I did it 20 hours earlier.
Just because of the sponginess. This is a thing that happens with some games where like the enemies are so spongy that combat, it's not hard. You just have to hit the enemy 150 times on hard or 75 times on medium or easy or whatever. So it doesn't really change the difficulty, it just changes them from sponges to normal enemies. But that's really telling. I've said before, I think difficulty sliders are a crutch that some developers rely on for balancing. Because it feels like if your game is well balanced, players should never need to change the difficulty. Like if it's finely tuned for the experience you're going for, they should just play the game and not have to tweak it. But in a case like this, if it's balanced around being spongy, then you're kind of thankful for it. But this is what's really fascinating about hearing that the Act 1 stuff is like 70% of the game. Because when we played at the preview event, we were asking like, okay, well, where do these characters go? Like, where do these combat abilities go after this to level up and scale up? Because we were under the impression that we were only like a third of the way through the game. So there's like another 40, 50, 60 hours of stuff to see. But you guys are saying that, like Maddie said in his review, that Act 1 is only like, is like 35 hours. And then that's like 70% of the total game. So we were actually playing pretty high level characters. We just didn't know that. And knowing that now, I'm like, okay, if that's like the ceiling of where characters end up, that is a little underwhelming, you know, because I thought there was like a long runway ahead of us still. But if that's where it actually is pretty close to ending, that is not as compelling. And that would be an instance where that mistake, if that review or that engineer guy, when he said that Act 1 was like 20 hours, Act 2 and 3 are about the same. If he was just mistaken, like that's an example of how one guy just offhandedly saying something could really alter somebody's expectation of the review. That's interesting.
I know how brutal all of this sounds, and I want to be super clear that I desperately wanted it to be different. I really did. I am aware of the stakes surrounding this game and what it means for BioWare's future, and I was praying so hard that BioWare's next game would be a fucking banger, and that the...
Who were you praying to? If you had prayed to him, it probably would have worked.
future of the studio would be secure and that we'd all be looking forward to a Mass Effect game, but I cannot say any of those things because the honest truth is that barring a few exceedingly rare moments, there wasn't a single aspect of Dragon Age the Veilguard that I actually enjoyed.
Oh, this is so funny though. Watch this again and then look at what's happening. I don't remember if I said this in my preview, but I remember mentioning it to other people at the preview event because it drove me crazy when playing on controller. Watch what happens when he runs up to these bundles, okay?
Mass Effect game, but I cannot say any of those things because the honest truth is that barring a few exceedingly rare moments, there wasn't a single aspect of Dragon Age the Veilguard that I actually enjoyed.
The pickup button is the same as the jump button. So when you run up to stuff, you start smashing A to pick up the stuff, but you just end up randomly jumping while trying to grab stuff. So you have to like reroute in the menus the buttons to avoid that happening. But you know, the game is built around the setups being the same. So it's that, you know, that is like a really obvious, simple, stupid thing. And that was something I remember seeing even at Summer Games Fest, when like the game director was playing the game and was having problems picking stuff up and jumping. I was like, if you guys saw that problem back then, why did you not fix it? Just reroute the button.
There are very few games that I play that I can say that of. And there are very few games there wasn't a single aspect of Dragon Age the Veilguard that I actually enjoyed, and there are very few games that I play that I can say that of.
There wasn't a single thing he enjoyed. Woof, woof. So taking that, you know, that's not just, I don't know what he would score that out of 10, but you know, that's obviously like a cataclysmic review score at the very least. Not positive, let's just say. But if we look at other reviewers, you know, we see Screen Rant, beautiful and engaging. You can see, let's read their synopsis real quick. Final thoughts. The only change I really found myself wishing for was that it would have been nice if there was a new game plus mode or some way to continue playing after the final battle. This adventure is so long I wanted to do everything, but ultimately needed to push through and finish the game after playing nearly 70 hours. So like one pattern, Maddie and Skillup both say they played 50 hours and they were done at 50. Like they did not want to keep going. The people who have given really positive reviews have played 70, 80, 90 hours in the case of the IGN review. So it seems like some people did not find the combat or the moment-to-moment gameplay uninteresting or boring. They found it compelling. And so they played for 70, 80, 90 hours, which is interesting. Overall, I feel as though the narrative explored here was incredible, with many thought-provoking moments and surprise twists. There are certainly some sensitive topics that won't be for everybody, but ultimately, I think we heard that in the IGN review. I do think that that's gonna be something, you know, Grums is gonna eat up, I'm sure. But overall, I feel that Dragon Age: The Veilguard is a heroic adventure worthy of the franchise, and they gave it a 9 out of 10. Their cons were a couple of game crashes. Character Creator still has some limitations, and they were frustrated it didn't have a new game plus. Everything else was great. Games Radar gave it a 9 out of 10. It's an approachable, expansive, action-oriented RPG. Feels like a true end to whatever the franchise was before. The book's not finished, but a significant chapter is closed. With Dragon Age: The Veilguard, while Dragon Age: The Veilguard is undoubtedly different in many ways from its predecessors and takes lessons learned from Mass Effect to heart, there's a lot to love mechanically and narratively about the new normal, and what is hopefully a foundation for what's to come. And they say pros are captivating companions with rich arcs, so they seemingly like the writing. Same with Catnip for lore nerds. Action-oriented combat that's tough but fair, so they really like the combat. And then cons, few meaningful inflection points beyond the end, somewhat linear hub areas to explore, which I've heard from multiple people already. Game Rant, let's see what they said in their synopsis. It's kind of a synopsis, honestly. 100 hours in. Again, the pattern seems to be the people that liked the moment-to-moment gameplay were able to get 70 to 100 hours in, and they are the ones that gave it amazing scores. But if people did not connect with the combat, for example, it seems like they were ready to get the game over with at 50 hours, 40 hours, 30 hours, which is why, like, Skill Up at 50 hours says he's done. Maddie, 50 hours, says he's done. But the people that gave the game really good scores were putting in 70, 80, 90, 100. Which is, again, interesting how much time differential there is. This person put twice as much time in as Skill Up and Maddie, and they say hundreds more to go. It's very interesting. They say there's been some concern that Dragon Age: The Veilguard would be heavily geared towards newcomers. I cannot say what it's like to experience Dragon Age: The Veilguard as someone new to the franchise, but it seems like it would be a fine entry point. What I can say as someone who has mentally lived in Thedas since Dragon Age Origins is that my obsession has been satisfied for now. That's not in terms of gameplay, because I have at least 5 more immediate playthroughs in me. 5? What? They played 100 hours and they say they have at least 5 more immediate playthroughs. Jesus Christ almighty. Calm down. But in terms of reveals, lore, story development, and all of that, I feel rewarded as a longtime fan. Dragon Age has always been a franchise where players feel some degree of ownership of their characters, their companions, and their choices. Dragon Age: Veilguard takes that ownership to new heights, gamifying the very concept and giving players control based on how they choose to interact with the game. From its combat to its companions, from its main quest to its faction quests. From its choices to its final missions, Dragon Age: The Veilguard puts everything into players' hands, the fate of Thedas included. And they gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. Did not list any cons. Engaging storytelling and lore, lovable companions, meaningful systematic choice, great engaging combat. Again, it's so fascinating, isn't it? Isn't this so much more fun than if it was just like, yep, everybody's like 8 out of 10. It's good. Like that's boring. That's boring. Here we're getting to an 8 out of 10 average, but it is super polarizing. Super polarizing. Eurogamer, they said, what BioWare has managed to accomplish here in the face of all the pressure it's faced since Dragon Age Inquisition came out 10 years ago is extraordinary. From head to toe, wing to wing, the Veilguard is exquisitely realized and full of sophistication across systems and storytelling. It's warm and welcoming, funny and hopeful, gentle when it needs to be, and of course, it's epic. Epic in a way I think will set the bar not only for BioWare in years to come, but for role-playing games in general. This is among the very best of them. It is the strongest and loudest answer BioWare could have mustered for the people still doubting whether it could do it. The answer is yes, emphatically. The Veilguard is spectacular. BioWare is back. 10 out of 10. Or 5 out of 5. As I said at the top of this, okay? And thank you. We have like, across both platforms, we have like 4,000 people watching. So thank you guys for that. Here's the deal. I'm not calling into question anybody's integrity, anybody's intention or honesty, okay? The people that gave this a 10 out of 10 score, I think certainly feel as though it's a 10 out of 10. I don't think that that's a an unfair thing to say. Okay. What I'm looking for is the difference between like Maddie and SkillUp and these people giving it a perfect score. What was so different about their experience that one of them is putting in, was it these guys? No, was it this guy? Yeah. One of them is putting 100 hours in, saying they have 500 more to go immediately, that they're ready to go. And then SkillUp, who's like, at 40 hours, I lowered the difficulty because I just wanted combat encounters to be done. Like, was it a difference in expectations? Is it a difference in the types of games they like? Did they not like certain characters and therefore the writing of those characters? Did Maddie and SkillUp find this character or these characters really annoying, and so that made these quests just boring and uninteresting? You know, what is that? For me, looking at it, it seems to be that Maddie and SkillUp both call out writing and say that the writing is really predictable or uninteresting, lacking in consequence. It's cringy in some cases, like Maddie said, where it's like the writing is just unacceptably bad. But then we notice IGN, GameSpot, or not GameSpot, Eurogamer, those guys, they are saying that the writing is phenomenal. So my guess is that once we play the game, there's probably some quests that are polarizing, and those quests pretty much dictate the tone that the rest of the game will take for you. That's my expectation. Now, to be fair, like, it's not, this is not all like 10 out of 10s or 5 out of 10s. People are not split to that degree. There are some people in the middle that I do want to give credit. Paul Tassi over on Forbes, which again, some people just very much don't like Paul. I don't know why, but I don't know. People are funny. He says, on the larger scale, even with my limited knowledge of Dragon Age lore, there are some big reveals about the nature of this universe by the end of the game that were genuinely interesting to me. I found that more interesting than the central kill the bad gods plot, which led to what I would consider a somewhat by the numbers final mission if you played a Mass Effect game. The format is familiar and a little forced. Is this the game Dragon Age fans have been waiting a decade for? I have no idea. Maybe not. But for me, someone who couldn't get through any of the other games, I often couldn't wait to play more of the Veilguard. It could have used some editing, more gameplay complexity, and maybe some sharper writing in parts, but it did many things well, and I enjoyed my time with it a little bit, or quite a bit. My guess is when I play this, there's going to be some really cringy quest lines. That would be my guess. I expect it's probably going to be one of those like 7 out of 10s where it's like, yeah, if you ignore this part, it's really good. Which is unfortunate. But with this, doesn't the lack of widely distributed review codes, doesn't it feel as though they're trying to keep something from you? Doesn't it kind of feel that way? Like, I am not entitled to a review code, to be perfectly clear. And again, this just frees up more time for me to play Monster Hunter, so I'm perfectly fine with this. But I have made many videos on games that specifically seem to excel with cringy writing. We've made a lot of videos on games like Forspoken or the Saints Row reboot or Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League or Concord or Dustborn. I'm realizing now there's a lot. There's a lot of them out there. Wow. But I have to wonder if there was perhaps concern over the reaction to some of the writing or quests in this game, and some of the people that were disincluded, maybe there was concern that those things would not make it through. Yeah, SkillUp is always brutally honest. Well, one thing you have to remember is that it's different per country. So like I said at the top, I spoke to one guy who's in Europe, and for his whole country, they got like 3 to 4 codes. For everybody that spoke their language, 3 to 4 codes. That's it. That's all they got. And how it works is like they have a marketing agency or somebody that works for that country. So if I can kind of chart it out. So what it usually works like is like if we have a map of this, and let's just say they generated 4 codes. Whoops, wrong. I need my pen. 4 codes for France. They have 15 codes for the UK. They have 5 codes for Europe. They maybe have like 4 for Poland. For Spain, maybe they have 3 codes generated. This is kind of how it breaks up. And then they go to a marketing agency within each of these countries. And that marketing agency then goes to creators, or in this case, it might not be a marketing agency. It might be like EA's marketing office in that country. But then they talk to creators they work with, and they distribute the codes based on whatever criteria they have, based on how many codes they have. In the US, maybe they have 30 codes or 20 codes or whatever. The reason why I pulled it up in Europe is because there's a lot of individual countries, whereas the US would just be one big country. But this is like Australia will have their own grouping of codes, even though there aren't that many gaming reviewers that live in Australia. They'll have their own. Whereas in the US, everybody's kind of sharing one pool. So there might be 2 or 3 YouTubers that get access to the game, while all of the media that is at the top of the list get their codes first, you know, because if they have this many codes and media takes up, you know, review sites and websites take up all of this, there might be 2 review codes down here left for YouTubers, and then they take the rest. But the priority goes to the big media guys. It could have just been a total free-for-all. They just randomized it, sent them out to whoever, and there wasn't much thought behind it. But again, the problem is the perception is the reality you have to deal with. The perception is that there was something that they didn't want out in the sunlight, you know? Let's see. Somebody tagged me in a post. Oh, somebody from Larian. Crom, what is this? I've been playing Dragon Age the Veilguard in complete secrecy behind my backpack at the office in front of a giant window in the kitchen. From me, you may be wondering, is this the game, or is this game compatible with my experience during BG3? So I'll tackle it from that perspective. The answer is yes. It is, to a heavy 9-season-long show, what a well-made, character-driven, binge-worthy Netflix series is. It has had a good sense of propulsion and forward momentum. The combat system is honestly brilliant. To me, a mix of Xenoblade and Hogwarts, which is Gigabrain genius. It knows when it needs to be a tentpole, or when it needs a tentpole narrative moment, and it knows when to let you toy around with your class and exploit some of its stronger elements. More important to me, it feels like it feels like the first Dragon Age game that truly knows what it wants to be. In short, if you want some character-driven romping with a strong combat system in a universe you know, love, or have heard of, it is much better than the average action game, and much less heavy than the gargantuan RPGs that may intimidate at times. In a word, it's fun. To me, I'm extremely happy BioWare gets to stick around, presumably in these uncertain times because of moronic corporate greed times, corporate greed, and an existential game, and a fun one at that. And this is coming from one of the big guys over at Larian. That's pretty high praise. If he likes it. It's also funny to me they're sending codes to devs but not to press to review. That seems odd. Looking for a job at EA. No, I think he's doing just fine. But here's the deal. Whenever you have a game that's this polarizing, people are saying it's either a masterpiece. A few people are like, it's pretty good, in like the 8 out of 10 range, which is kind of where that Larian post seems. That's kind of in line with like the Forbes review at like 85 out of 100. And then you have other people like Skill Up and Maddie who say that it's horrifically disappointing. It's like, I don't know what number they would put on it, but it is a huge disappointment, and they were ready for it to be over. For that, I mean, shocker, it seems like one of those games that you got to wait till your particular reviewer that you tend to agree with most until they post their coverage. Maybe that for you is Skill Up or Maddie, and you're like, oh, I always agree with Maddie, or I always agree with Skill Up. And maybe for them, hearing they hated it is enough answer for you to be like, I'm not going to like this. But if you're somebody that's like waiting for my review, or if you're somebody that identifies more with me or with other reviewers, you're just gonna have to wait to see what they say. Because at the same time, other YouTubers like Mortismal, you guys are saying he liked it.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my review after 100% for Dragon Age the Veilguard. The long-awaited next entry into the Dragon Age series following, of course, Inquisition back in 2014. This game is trying to do a lot of things with changes to the formula that are expected given how long it's been, but are nonetheless certain to, I would say, split opinions on this one. But before we dive into that, I review games after 100% all the time to set me apart from other reviewers on the platform, and while that does include the achievements, it also includes a lot more than that. There's a link below to a video covering everything I go over. My Steam profile is public and linked below as well, though a couple more notes on this one in particular. We're obviously a few days out from the official launch of the game, which means that A,
Go to the end. Oh, does he not like do the summary at the top? Does he do it all at the end? Conclusion.
So as a conclusion, the base game of Dragon Age the Veilguard is $60 US, and for that price, I think you're getting a great game that does a lot of things really, really well. That makes it, as far as I'm concerned, the best entry in the series, and frankly, my own personal game of the year. So probably needless to say at that point, I'm absolutely giving this one a buy. I think you should check it out. I think it's very good. And while I acknowledge that continual shift in direction from the original game isn't going to be for everybody, this is still a great game. And
I mean, that's his game of the year. Wow. Okay. So here's the deal. There is certainly going to be a lot of confirmation bias, not just in chat right now, but also in the comment section when this goes up as a clip and everything. And I want everybody to at least be aware of that. If you went into Veilguard and these reviews hoping that it would be bad, I have a feeling that you are now latching on to Skill Up and Maddie's reviews, being like, see, they were the honest ones. They called it out. But if you were hoping it would be good, you're probably looking at at like a Eurogamer or Screen Rant or these other institutions, or Mortismal, that's saying it's a masterpiece, it's game of the year, it's amazing. And I think we all need to be very cognizant of the fact that it's easy to just lean into that confirmation bias. But I don't necessarily think that that's particularly helpful, right? Because these people are, again, I'm not going to tolerate people calling into question anybody's integrity. These people are accurately describing, as best they can, their experience with the game. Mortismal Gaming is saying for him, it's his game of the year. He loved it. He's not lying about that. For him, he loved the game. Okay. Again, this shouldn't even have to be said, but we're in an age where if somebody disagrees with you, a lot of people feel the need to call into question their motivations or call them a liar or paid for or whatever. They're just saying that they really like the game, okay? For Eurogamer, they thought the game was a masterpiece. What I'm thinking, I'm trying to figure out why people have such different conclusions. Like, sometimes you might look at it and you might be like, oh, this person doesn't like turn-based games. They played Baldur's Gate. They said Baldur's Gate was bad. Oh, well, I can figure out why they thought Baldur's Gate was bad, right? Like, you can figure out why they came to that conclusion, what the difference between the people that called it a masterpiece and the people that said it was awful. You can figure out what that difference is. With this, I'm not so sure what the difference is. I'm not sure why Maddie found it so disappointing, why Skill Up thought it was, like, he didn't have a single thing he liked, but then other people are saying it's their game of the year or are giving it 10 out of 10 scores. And if anybody in chat has theories as to what it could be, please let me know. I'm not sure. So yeah, I'm just, the difference is money. No, again, this is one of those things where people are like, oh, the review was bought and paid for. You guys realize, like, that is illegal, right? Like, EA's lawyers have you sign tons of paperwork just to, like, sign an NDA, much less, like, do a sponsored thing. I've done, like, sponsored iTrides where, like, they might pay me to do a video where I just show a game to my audience. I'm like, this isn't a review. I'm just showing the game to you. Make up your own minds. But here's kind of my impressions and thoughts on it based on this, like, sliver. And with those, like, there are so many disclosures and things you jump through. Like, they will not let you publish the video unless you've done all these disclosures, marked it as sponsor, whatever. There is no such thing as, like, paid reviews. Okay. Like, it's just not a thing. I hate to break it to you. Like, if it were a thing, the story would have gotten out by now. Is that a Yeti mug? Yes, it is. Yeah, I'm a bougie boy. I love Yeti. Advertising revenue is the same as paying. I hate to break it to you, but negative reviews tend to do a lot more than positive reviews. So you're saying that, like, the 10 out of 10 guys are trying to get easy ad revenue? Like, again, it's just, it doesn't follow through. If you look at it, you're like, oh, negative reviews do well, positive reviews do well. Okay, so then they just make the review honestly. Like, again, this is one of those moments to kind of self-reflect. If you are finding yourself wanting to wholeheartedly reject the positive reviews and only look at the negative reviews, you should pause and wonder why that is. Like, what is it that's making me want to reject the positive reviews and only accept the, to be fair, less frequent negative reviews? There's more positive, as of right now, there's more positive reviews than there are negative reviews, which is why the Metacritic is higher. So I think like you have to pause and wonder what that is that's forcing you to do that. And what I would encourage you to do is to maintain a level head. If you found this potentially compelling, you can try it for 2 hours on Steam, and if you don't like it, you can return it. It's kind of brilliant how Steam does that, isn't it? Isn't it great? But you can try it for 2 hours, and if you don't like it, return it. No big deal. Whatever. That's kind of why those returns are there. But if you were never interested, like, I don't think even the 10 out of 10 scores would have convinced you otherwise, because even now you might want to just latch onto the negative ones. So for me, I just find this thoroughly confusing. I don't know why it's so polarizing for people. And I'm almost more excited now to check out the game than I was when I, like a day ago or 2 days ago. Like I thought maybe it would land at most people giving it like 8 out of 10 and it'd be like, it's good, and move on. But it's fascinating to see this. Some of the writing you see in Skilp's video is not for me. Can you do me a favor? Can you pull up a timestamp? I don't want to like just watch his whole video, but if you have like a timestamp of when he talks about some of the cringe writing, please tell me, because I'd like to pull that up specifically, but I don't want to just like watch his whole review. Okay, he has a spoiler warning for the writing. Let's see this. Okay. So, spoiler alert, this is going to be a section of the writing he says is cringy. Thank you for pulling this up. It looks like Razor found timestamp. Okay, let's see.
Do that now. Okay, here we go. Dragon Age games have, generally speaking, been pretty dark. I mean, the first game opens with a ritual where you drink demon blood to join a sacred order, and one of the other guys doesn't survive that ritual. He just kind of dies right there on the spot, and then another guy freaks out and he's like, no, please don't make me do that. And then Duncan, who's conducting the ritual, knows that there's no way to back out of this ceremony, so he murders that dude in cold blood before whispering in his ear,
I am sorry.
Now, if that moment is like an 8 out of 10 in terms of how dark you might expect your fantasy to be, Dragon Age the Veilguard never gets above like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. It was genuinely shocking to me to see just how safe and cheery and bright and G-rated this whole thing was. Like, genuinely shocked, because there are precisely 0 moments where something happens that made me go, oh shit, all right, now we're talking. I used the word banality in my intro, and one of the biggest reasons this game feels so banal is because when you eventually realize that nothing bad is ever going to happen, you stop hoping for something interesting or surprising to happen. You just surrender yourself to the endless stream of predictable, inoffensive fantasy tropes.
Which is interesting, because at the preview event, they also told us, we can't show you much, but it gets dark. Like they told us that there was a lot of mature stuff in the game that we, couldn't see, but like, that's interesting. In place of more serious, more dark events and characters is the embrace of a more playful, silly tone. It's about keeping it light, like Balara here talking about the fact that 2 elven gods are now out to destroy the world.
Oh, just finding out that 3 of my gods are out there trying to end the world.
Remember when I said she was the most annoying character, and the moment I could take her off my party, I did? Because she said stupid stuff like this nonstop.
Why wouldn't I be okay?
Emmerich is a necromancer, and I know that sounds a little scary, raising the dead and commanding them as your minions, but don't worry, BioWare is not going to let you get freaked out by all that scary death stuff. Emmerich happens to be a lovely old gentleman. He is dapper, he is proper, he delights in pleasantries, and he has a servant, a lovable skeleton named Manfred, who happily dotes on Emmerich and screeches with glee whenever he's mentioned. He's not the only companion with a pet though. Davram also has a baby griffin named Asan, and he can be a little rowdy sometimes, like here when Manfred and Asan are squabbling over something.
Okay, that's enough. Quiet now.
I'm such a bad person. I just was looking at the griffin and I saw the feathers and I paused and I was like, I wonder what griffin tastes like. What is wrong with me? It's like, do you think it tastes like chicken? Like, obviously griffins aren't real, but I'm kind of curious. It's probably gamey. I see. I would think like big chicken, like it tastes like a big chicken. But I was like, I'm supposed to be evaluating this section of writing, and I'm just, my brain drifts for a second. I wonder what griffin tastes like. So stupid.
Fine. Who wants a treat?
Now look, I know that you could go back to previous Dragon Age games and pull the same clips that show the same lighthearted silliness. Lighthearted fun and humor has always been a part of every great BioWare game. But what I'm trying to communicate here is that there's a lot more of these moments in Veilguard, but more importantly, there's a complete absence of anything dark to counterbalance them. As such, the overall tone of this game is silly and juvenile. Its unwillingness to confront darker themes also extends to a total unwillingness to create any meaningful conflict between companions. Conflict between companions is a really important part of these sorts of cinematic RPGs. It not only creates narrative tension, but also forces important gameplay decisions, like who do you side with in a real moment of truth situation, right? Dragon Age the Veilguard has none of that. Zero. Companions never have prolonged substantive disagreements about anything. They just get along almost all the time. And when they do express some sort of disagreement about something, it is so lukewarm and then resolved so quickly that the whole thing feels entirely cosmetic. Like during a mission, Lucanus makes a mistake and Davram calls him out on it very briefly. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is the start of the first inter-team conflict. Nope. Like an hour later, the very next conversation that we all have together is this.
You two done fighting then? I can't have you at each other's throats.
Lucanus is still an assassin. Kills people for money.
And Davran's still self-righteous. Judgmental, too. Typical warden. Ah, no offense.
If we let that get in the way of stopping the gods...
We won't. We cannot.
They were never at each other's throats, by the way. They literally had one perfectly civil conversation where no one even raised their voice, and now they've, patched it up. However, BioWare clearly want to create some semblance of conflict between team members, so they instead focus on petty squabbles. Like here, Emmerich wants to bring too many books to a camping trip that Harding is planning, and Harding is upset about that. Just watch the clip.
Harding, does it really matter if Emmerich brings 8 books?
9, actually.
And Emmerich? So what if Harding is fine sleeping on dirt?
Not all the time.
This is the sort of conflict that Veilguard is constantly generating between team members, just arguing about utter nonsense. And did you see how Rook needed to sort it out at the end? He talks to them like they're children.
The example of the the preschool teacher trying to settle disputes between toddlers. Like, did you take his book? Did you? Yes, I took his book. Give it back. I don't want to. Give back the book. It's starting to make a little bit more sense. Okay. Interesting. Let's see. You said Maddie's was 7.
I mean this in the least insulting way. It truly felt like BioWare watched some Pixar films over the weekend and took that energy straight into the game.
Okay. Try again.
Balara again. You remember actually the initial trailer? Part of the initial gut reaction that people had that was so negative towards Dragon Age Veilguard was with Balara jumping out of the wall, making some stupid comment, and then getting grabbed by the tentacles and pulled back in. You remember that? She seems to be a common thread here, where this silly, oh, I'm so carefree and quirky. It seems to be a common thread here.
Deep breaths. There. Damn it! Oh no! Sorry. Just breaking things.
Objectively speaking, I see that moment and I go, hey, that's not awful. That's just, I don't know how else to put it. That's just not Dragon Age to me. And there are decent
It's certainly lighthearted. And maybe this is where the distinction comes. A lot of us were led to believe that there were going to be some really dark, intense moments in the story. That's at least what was communicated to me at the preview event. It was one of the questions we had was that first trailer seemed really, really lighthearted, very Marvel, silly, whatever. And no. They one person I spoke to in particular was no, we have some intensity. that comes. But what we saw at the preview event, most of the intensity happened off screen or was mentioned or alluded to, but we never really saw it. But we were told like there's gonna be intensity there. Let's see.
Is for something different that Dragon Age and BioWare really has never done before. And last but not least is romance, which is a big part of a BioWare game. I mean, the writing here, I found specifically, and I'm sorry, I hate to use the word, man. I hate to use the word, but cringe? I mean, hearing is believing. Go ahead.
Please listen. You're not alone. Whatever's out there, we'll face it together, I promise. Together.
I could kiss you right now. I'm going to kiss you right now.
At least there's something we might need to. It's your magic.
Rook?
You make the world spin, Lace Harding.
Rook! Lyrium. It's like I'm infused with lyrium.
I noticed it when we touched. That night when we talked about your dreams.
You knew? You knew and you still kissed me?
Wow, I feel drunk.
Yeah, it's because I turned your head into mush.
Or it's love.
You boob! This is not funny! Okay, I'll fix it. I promise. I will find a way and I will fix it. Okay? Okay? Damn it, no, don't touch me!
And my last note on the narrative here, and I feel like I've just like
Okay, that I wasn't ready for her to call him a boob. Game features booba confirmed. Okay. That to me, maybe I'm desensitized after Concord, Dustborn, Suicide Squad, all that. That to me was not that bad. I'll be honest. Like maybe you know Maddie's brain is more intact than mine, since he didn't force himself to play those games at least as much. But that was not that bad. It wasn't great, to be clear, but that was not as bad as I was braced for it to be, funnily enough. But again, just to, I guess to wrap all this up, because we're kind of at this point going in circles, I just want everybody to be aware of the impact of cognitive bias and affirmation bias or confirmation bias. There are some very good reviews for Dragon Age the Veilguard, okay? There are. I know that might be triggering or whatever, but there are. There's even big name review sites like Eurogamer, Game Rant, even like IGN is giving it a 9. But like Games Radar, 9 out of 10. There's some big review sites that are typically pretty on the nose, some less so, but there's some big review sites that are giving this 9s or 10s, okay? At the same time, there are some that are giving it middling reviews, you know, in like the 6 out of 10 range. Other websites like Forbes are giving it like 8.5 out of 10. And then other people are giving it just horrific reviews and are saying they didn't enjoy a single thing about it, is what SkillUp said. And then other YouTubers are saying it's their game of the year, like Mortismal Gaming. It is just as easy to latch on to the 10 out of 10 score as it is to latch on to the terrible don't touch this score, okay? And if you find yourself wanting to just talk about the one review and not acknowledge all of the others, you are just trying to affirm your preconceived notion, okay? There doesn't seem to be a super clear consensus. Like, you know, a lot of games that are 10 out of 10s, like Baldur's Gate, pretty much everybody who played that game said it was a masterpiece. Same with like Red Dead 2. Or It Takes Two. I mean, anybody who played that loved it. So for those like universal acclaimed games, there's not much to mess with. It's just everybody says it's great. With this, it seems like there's a lot more mixed opinions going on. Why that is, I think will probably reveal itself in the next few days, but it seems to me that a lot of this comes down to tone. Some people that like the lighter tone and are okay with a lot of those impactful things happening off screen are really connecting with the game and loving it, giving it perfect scores, game of the year, all of that. Other people like SkillUp and Maddie found the gameplay and the writing really, really lacking. And again, SkillUp said he didn't enjoy a single thing about it, which is pretty harsh, to say the very least. But it's important to note that as of this moment, those negative reviews are technically speaking the outliers. The general like average perspective is like 8 out of 10 ish, depending on the platform you're looking at. And so those like these scores will change as the weeks go by, as more people review it and put up their numbers, especially because review codes were so limited. But the current like consensus, if there even is one, or the average perspective, is that it's got like a B, which is a very good score. I mean, that's the same score that Black Myth Wukong got in their Metacritic, okay? So it's not fair to just hand wave it away, say Skillup hated it, therefore it's a flop. And at the same time, I don't think it's fair to say, well, this one website gave it a 10 out of 10, said it was a masterpiece, therefore it's a masterpiece. It seems like the truth usually lands somewhere in the middle, and it probably means that some people are going to love it, some people are going to find it really lackluster. I find it funny that on the Metacritic page, they still have the Dreadwolf trailer. Like, doesn't it seem like they should have fixed that? That's just funny. It's the old name for the game. Anyway, fascinating. I was not ready for it to be this polarizing. It's very interesting. And I can't wait to check out the game myself, because now I'm just wondering where I'm going to land on it. Like, was there a reason? Did they know something I didn't? Did they know something I didn't? Which is why they didn't want it to get in my hands before it launched? Or was it just a total crapshoot? I don't know. Some of the fluctuation could be due to the age gap. Maybe. I know some people on X were trying to frame it as though YouTubers were the only ones that could be trusted and they are the ones giving it bad reviews. That's just objectively not true. There's plenty of websites that are not giving it great reviews right now, or at the very least, like meh reviews in like the 6 out of 10 range, calling out various problems. And then some YouTubers like Mortismal, he said it's his game of the year after playing 100% of it. You know, so this is not a game that can be whittled down to a simple narrative that's just a single soundbite. It's more complicated than that.
Hand Drawn Life donated $20 through Super Chat. This new Dragon Age is just visually and tonally not a direction I was looking for in the franchise. As an old-school Dragon Age Origins player, I would rather pay $20 for a comment on YouTube than pay for Veilguard.
Okay. That's comment of the day. That's pretty freaking funny. Honestly, at the end of this, I'm mainly going to be looking for what my wife has to say about it. She is an old school hardcore Dragon Age fan. Dragon Age Origins all day, every day. She's played it like 15,000 times. And hearing what she thinks about it is going to be really interesting. And honestly, that's the opinion I'm much more interested in compared to my own. Like, I'm not that interested in what I think about the game from the outside. I'm more interested in what she thinks because, you know, she has a lot more investment into the franchise. So maybe what we'll do is I'll have her play it and then we'll kind of compare notes and we'll bring her on stream and, you know, see what she says. Origin fans are likely to hate it. Well, that's where I'm interested. Maybe it is that like Inquisition fans love it and Origins fans hate it. Maybe that's the determining factor. You know, I'm really interested in how that breaks down. Skillup did like Anthem. I think if I recall correctly, I think he was like, it has potential, but they blew the amount of content. I don't think he was like, yeah, this is well worth the money at launch. Maybe he was, and I'm misremembering, but I think that there's a lot more. This is not the simple reviews dropped, let's talk about it kind of thing. This is a much more complicated thing. There's something about Dragon Age that some people love and other people think is garbage and hate. And that's always interesting. Like, it's just always interesting. Blake, thank you for the 10. Not to sound like that guy, but games that tackle that kind of subject typically get great reviews from these kinds of outlets, no matter what. So it's hard to actually tell if the game is good or not. Oh, you mean like the discussion when they brought up like the non-binary plot line and storyline? It reminds, well, Paul Tassi tweeted out something. We'll warn you right now that shortly after launch, Dragon Age is probably going to produce the most annoying discourse of the year with those guys regarding a particular quest line. I've heard rumblings about this questline as well. And I do think, hearing in the IGN review that the reviewer said that BioWare specifically asked that they not show the character or talk about the character in question, that to me, I mean, like, it's not even in question. Like, they were hiding away a character that they thought would get blowback. Like, they're not allowed to show it in the review, the character or the quest line, which is interesting. So I do think when the game launches, there will be some interesting revelations probably when people get their hands on that quest line, because why would they need to hide away the quest line? Like, there's something the IGN person said specifically, they were not allowed to show or mention who the quest was about. And in most review guides, they'll say, don't show anything from this quest line, don't show anything from this or that. Don't show this character, it's spoilers, whatever. But with this specifically, it seems like there's a quest line they didn't want people talking about, which is interesting. If it's not for spoiler reasons, you know, that's just very interesting. Let's see. Basic Witch, thank you for the 5. Wanted to say that Akun Athok maybe is a word meaning born one gender but lives as another to Kunari, so it doesn't surprise me there's a non-binary character. It might be the Kunari, honestly. John, thank you for the 5. Hey, Luke, Fextra Life and Wolfheart also didn't get a code. It's obvious BioWare is trying to control the narrative. Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, pretty much, I don't think it was BioWare. I think this was EA. Everybody I've spoken to, it seems like it was EA that made these decisions, so it's not fair to put it on BioWare. It was the marketing campaign people above them. So, you know, the same people that did the marketing trailer that was so poorly received when they announced this, it seems like they are the ones that made this choice. He took my thing.